The Guns on Pegs podcast is brought to you by ITAP Group. Hello and welcome back to the Guns on Pegs podcast. My name is George Brown. Chris is with me as usual. Chris, how are you doing?
Very good. Very good. You?
Yeah, very well, thank you. I've had a very nice little time, but you've got the biggest news, I think.
I mean, it's work related, right? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
I mean, we've been absolutely flat out, haven't we? For those that know that we launched Scripound, it was just called Scripound when we first launched it. Back in, when was it? September 23, am I right?
Yep.
And we then launched Scripound Garden. We rebranded that to Scripound Countryside, as it now is. And we then launched Scripound Gardening in November 24, and that was going great guns. And we've just launched Scripound Food, which is 30 of the best food writers, and obviously the others are 30 of the best countryside writers, 30 of the best gardening writers, 30 of the best food writers, and it's flying.
And when you say just, I mean, you do mean really just. You know, the pre-launch went live.
Like 2 days ago.
Yeah, 2 days ago. Recording on Monday, it went live on Saturday, and it's going great guns.
Can I just say that we have 499 subscribers in 48 hours, and we're waiting for our 500th. So if there's a little celebration on this pod, it's because we've hit it in 48 hours.
You're just going to be sitting watching the counter, are you, instead of concentrating?
Oh, don't worry, I've got notifications to this sort of thing, George. It's like my heartbeat. But it's very exciting. And what's lovely about the food channel is they're kind of like one step away from this original thing that a lot of them know us to be involved in. And they really get, a lot of them really get, like even though some of them are sort of very modern and very different, right? A lot of them really get this sort of the whole hunter-gatherer, food to plate, not food to plate, field to fork, whatever you want to call it. They get that stuff. And it's really nice because there's some people in the gardening world who really, really don't get that. It's quite awkward and I've been doing battle with a couple of people today who've sort of got various issues on the past and any connections with shooting and so on, which is always a bit of trickiness, but otherwise all good.
Good. Well, I mean, you're absolutely right though, because I was saying to someone this weekend, as far as I'm concerned, the three channels that we have at the moment are all basically the same thing. It's gardening, food, countryside. I think they are all different sides of the same dice in many ways, and so I can totally see the relationship. And in fact, some of our countryside writers have been coming to me saying, "So, tell me about the food. Any chance I can write some pieces on there?" And I thought, yeah, that's great. Like, let's get some cross-pollination going.
Yeah, there is huge crossover. The food one's really exciting. We've got a food launch dinner tomorrow night with all these really famous food writers, which is quite funny. So yeah, we're operating in all sorts of different circles. Anyway, you've been building chicken pens. I saw a picture on WhatsApp at the weekend, which I haven't had a chance to talk to you about yet.
Well, in the latest chicken news update, I've been having a lot of fun. We've got the number of chickens I have that has been growing exponentially for the last few years. And as you'll remember from my article about how much I enjoy bodging things, I made an extremely rickety nest box for them probably about a year ago now that has no right angles and, no two pieces of wood the same dimensions or color or anything like that. And it was starting to get a bit ridiculous and also starting to fall apart. So this time I did it properly. I drew a design, I measured everything, I used new materials.
You built it?
I built it.
It looks like you bought it off Temu, which is that shit thing that everyone gets advertised to on Instagram.
The only problem with it is that I didn't think about the weatherproofing when I did the design. So obviously all the timber that I bought needed to be treated in some way. So I sent Mrs. Brown off to our local branch of Homebase, which is about to close down, just to get whatever sort of weatherproofing paint she could find. And the only one that was available was effectively in gunmetal grey. So this nest box, which is, 1.5 meters wide and, half a meter deep and all this sort of thing. It looks like a sort of lost Russian submarine or something. It's absolutely enormous. But and the good news is the chickens really love it, because within 5 minutes of us putting it in the chicken run, one of the hens had gone in and laid an egg. So
nice.
It's got approval already. So I'm very
Hey, You told me the other day that the reason my chickens weren't laying eggs is because they're ex-layers, and that's why they were not laying eggs, because they're useless.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not that. They're actually
Uh,
great at laying eggs. It's just our neighbours get there first, and we share them with our neighbours. Because they're away. I had a text. They were like, "Oh, we're in Venice this weekend." And I was like, "Wonderful! I'll go and check chickens." Anyway, there was like 9 eggs in there. It's like, thanks very much.
well, there you go. And then
Yeah.
also over the weekend, I took the opportunity, the first sort of sunny Saturday morning, to go and try out my new fishing rod that I received for Christmas. Shout out to Matt Kidd for helping Mrs. Brown choose the right one. And had an absolutely lovely time. A couple of hours, managed to snaffle one on a buzzer. So that was great. It's all been lovely.
Nice.
Yeah,
That is
I've been
enjoyable.
skiing, I've been climbing. I'm so wholesome at the moment. Anyway, that's enough about me being smug. Tell us about today's guest.
Indeed. So today we have a writer, a YouTuber, someone who is one half of the TGS podcast alongside friend of the show, Johnny Carter. He's a game shot, a fly fisherman, a deer stalker. He's a former gamekeeper, a former river keeper. And somehow, when he finds time, he's Director of Environment Policy and Politics at the National Gamekeepers Organisation. So please put down the bucket of wild bird feed mix, keeping your songbird population going in the off-season, and put your hands together for Tim Weston.
Thank you. That's some introduction. I feel quite inflated. That's amazing.
Been there, done that.
Well, it's really, really good of you to have me on, guys. Because I listen to the podcast, so this is the one I'm not going to listen to because I can't listen to myself. It's terrible. But
I'm with you on that one. Yeah, good man.
It's really good to have you with us, Tim. Just very quickly before we go any further, for those who don't know, what does a riverkeeper do? And in any way, how does it compare to the job of a gamekeeper?
So I was based on the Southern English chalk stream, so it is a very different role to a gillie up north or on the salmon rivers. It's basically maintaining the river banks, maintaining the fish stocks, whether you're wild fish or not. There's a huge amount of customer service in there because you've got to talk to fishermen and massage their egos, because we all love to have our being told that we're the best at it in the world. And I was quite heavily involved with fish farming because we were restocking. So we were on the river where we did put fish in. So we had a fish farm as well. But it was really good fun for the number of years I did it. It was amazing experience. It taught me that I'm absolutely petrified of eels.
Okay.
So that's one of my take homes from being a river keeper. So yeah, there's some really good things. I learned from a very old river keeper that a really good way to control pike was to shoot them with a 410, and there's lots of interesting stuff that happens on the riverbank that you probably don't think does.
Does a lot of pike control go on these days? I think that the sort of fly fishing for pike is quite popular these days, isn't it? I'd imagine they're encouraged to keep them about. Same way as with grayling, they used to bop them all on the head, didn't they? And they're rather encouraged now.
Yeah, so I came in at the very back end of the it has to be trout or nothing era, and then as I was growing into the role, it became much more about river management as opposed to species management.
So much in line with the way that gamekeeping is changing as well then.
Yeah, Chris, that's a really good point, because game management is now more about habitat management.
Yeah,
to get what you need than species management. And there is a certain amount of species management, obviously, in all the roles, but essentially both roles are conservation roles. And this is something that really drives me mad. So I was at London Zoo on Friday for a translocation workshop conference. So translocation is a big thing. So you want to take one species from somewhere else and release it somewhere else. So pine marten beaver, lions and tigers and bears, whatever it might be. One thing that frustrated me with the facilitators was we were the game managers, and the other people in the room were the conservationists. Yeah, it really bugged me.
That makes me angry.
So I pointed out that actually we're all conservationists. We just get to the same point in a different direction.
How did that go?
It depended who you were talking to. So when you're talking to people from the Woodland Trust or Forestry England, that was perfectly fine. That was yeah, okay, no, we get that. When we were talking, when it was with other people in the room, it may not have been quite so accepted that there is a second, third, or fourth route to do something. And I'll give you a prime example. When we were talking about killing crows to save a lapwing.
Yeah.
So this was part of the workshops, killing crows to save a lapwing. One of the ideas that was thrown out there in the workshop, instead of killing crows, why don't you release a white-tailed seagull to sit in the tree above the nest so the crow won't go near the lapwing nest? So I pointed out the lapwing probably wouldn't go near the lapwing nest.
What? Who are these people?
Well, the ones in charge, I'm afraid.
Well, these are all topics I want to get onto later. So stiffen your sinews, Chris, and do so by telling us what you're drinking.
So do you know what? I've reverted to a beer that I had in one of the very first episodes, which was during what was called coronavirus and now then became sort of COVID. And I have a Corona. And I had it in one of our first... yeah, I had it in one of our first pods because I felt sorry for them with everything being called Corona. So I thought I'd do my bit to help their brand because I think it's a bloody brilliant beer. And given that spring has started and the sun is back out, I thought nothing better to remind me of the fact that life does get better than dark days and horrible wet clay in Kent. And I'll have a Corona.
Very nice. Very good. And Tim, how about you? What have you got?
Well, I'm missing the shooting season. So I'm harking back to every shoot day breakfast, and I'm having a whiskey mac.
Lovely. It's quite the way to start the day.
I was going to have a Bloody Mary, but I couldn't find any tomato juice, so I thought whiskey mac will do. So it's one of the two, isn't it? Depending on how warm it is.
Yeah, lovely. Very good.
What are you on, George?
Well, I too am feeling the joys of spring. And way back in my youth, I spent some time living in the Veneto in northern Italy, on the mainland opposite Venice, but spent a lot of time living in Venice, where they drink a lot of Bardolino, which is a very light red wine. And I know it's sort of trendy and fashionable, or the done thing to like sort of big, chunky, chewy red wines that coat your tongue with a thick layer of velvet and so on. But I quite like a thin, fruity red wine and, sort of even lightly chilled. I'm a big fan of Beaujolais. I think I might even have Beaujolais on the podcast before. And I was in Majestic the other day buying some wine for a dinner party. And in order to make it up to 6 bottles and get their discount, I was just having a look around to see what I could find. And I saw a very reasonably priced bottle of Bardolino. So I had 2 of them. And I've just opened it today. And it is tremendous. I haven't had one for ages. I really, really like it.
Did I miss the grape? Did you say the grape?
I don't think I did say the grape. It's a Bardolino, and I haven't got the bottle to hand, so I can't tell you the grape, but it's lovely stuff.
That's not a grape then, I don't know.
No, I think it's a region.
Fine.
Or a style, one or the other.
I've got to say, one of the best things about coming on this podcast is work time drinking.
That's why we started it.
I did try and have to say to George, can we stop recording pods at 2 p.m? I find that's a little bit disruptive to my day.
It's difficult on a Monday. It's fine on a Friday.
There's a lot going on at the moment. I feel like every hour is important. But and by the way, 500 and 501. There you go. Within
excellent.
a minute of each
well
other.
Done, us.
Congratulations.
And let's have a sip to that. That's an enjoyable moment.
Cheers. Right. Okay. So we're going to turn to the post bag. And this is a segment, Tim, called Whose Bird Is It Anyway? We ask our listeners to write in with their shooting quandaries and queries and dilemmas, and we do our best to help them out. This one comes from somebody I have decided to call Lancelot, who has written, Dear George and Chris, I've been a long-time listener to the podcast and recently found myself facing a bit of a moral dilemma that I'd appreciate some advice on. A friend from university and I enjoy shooting side by side on game days, and we're both in the market for an English sidelock, as my Churchill boxlock is starting to show its age. I recently came across a stunning pair of Armstrong & Co. guns, and shared the find with my friend for his opinion. As a student, purchasing a pair feels somewhat impractical since I don't shoot double gun days, and there's a significant financial commitment involved. My friend has suggested that we go halves on the pair and each take one gun. However, I'm struggling with whether this would be seen as breaking up a historic pair that's been together for over 100 years. Is that morally acceptable? Furthermore, if we did go ahead with the purchase, how would you recommend we decide who gets gun number 1 and number 2, and who takes ownership of the double gun case? I'd appreciate any insight on the matter. Thanks in advance for your input.
What a cracking bit of correspondence.
Isn't that great? I love it.
This is great thinking too, but I feel like we're about to take this apart.
It's also a very first world problem. When I was a student, it was more about how to pay the rent. So
yeah, when I was a student, we're going halves on a kebab rather than
yeah, exactly. Whether you can afford to fuel up the car, not whether you can afford to buy a pair of sidelock English guns.
Tim, thank you for pointing that out. I would have just carried on with the quandary at hand rather than the fact that this is absolutely ridiculous.
Well, yeah, so before we do the quandary, should we have a stab at which university they're at?
That's unnecessary. We've done that one.
It's either RAU or Bristol or St Andrews. Those are my guesses.
I was going to say St Andrews or Bristol. We're going to be
or Harper.
No one in Harper. They'd be worrying about how short they can get their rugby shorts. That's all.
I know a few lads that went to Harper, and they definitely have this sort of dilemma. Right, what are we doing? Okay, Tim, just hark yourself back to university days of having all that cash and spend
loads of money for my. I mean, the first thing is when you're doing anything, do it properly. So if you're going to buy a gun, buy a pair. Right.
Yep.
That's the first thing. If you need to break a pair up, now, basically, it's probably like two people who've been married for a long time who don't particularly like each other, isn't it? So you might be doing them a favor anyway. So at least they'll both get used.
Yeah.
Right. So there's that as well. So I would have no problem breaking the pair up if they were both going to get used. That wouldn't be an issue for me whatsoever, because you can always bring them back for like Boxing Day shoots and they can see each other, and they'd be a bit awkward, wouldn't they, together for a bit? There'd be a bit of hostility, and then they'd have a drink together and they'd warm up a bit, and then they'd get back to they'd get to like each other again, but they could always leave at the end of the day again. So they could still meet like puppy siblings.
Yes. I like the marriage analogy though, because you could build in a prenup.
Yes.
So if either of them ever wants to sell, the other one has to have first refusal of bringing the pair back together.
Yeah.
And do we take like a market value buyout clause, like sort of Man City do on every little youth team player they ever get rid of? Like they get the buyback opportunity
at whatever they paid for it now.
Time. Yeah, they set a sort of market rate minus 20%, and then the new owner gets to buy the second gun if he wants it.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Oh, I was taking the piss out of Man City because they'd done it to an Ipswich player, and I hate them for it. But anyway, hold on a second. Are they identical shape and size, or are they going to bastardize these guns with all sorts of adjustments?
Oh, that's a good point. Ooh. Gun fit.
No, that makes a big difference. Actually, that does make a big difference, because then they won't be a pair.
Yeah, you can't chop 2 inches off the end of one of the stocks, can you?
I think this changes my answer to this question, because I think this is crucial. If there's going to be adjustments, because he says, I don't do double gun days. Right. The opportunity is going to arise. Someone's going to give you a lovely invite one day, and you're going to ring up your mate and go, can I borrow the gun? And this needs to be considered by both of them, because this is a massive plus side. If whatever happened, one of them marries particularly well, and daughter of some sort of Grousemore owner gets an invite, let's just say this, they are going to make sure, they're going to need to make sure this thing is, they're both a pair still, a matched pair.
Okay, so there's probably some good news here though, which is that these guns are very old. People were much smaller. The chances are you're not going to need to have the guns shortened. You might have to have some cast and that sort of thing done, but I think that's quite easily undone unless it's bonkers amounts. So we're talking extension of the stock most likely, which can be done in a non-permanent way with a butt pad and all this stuff.
Once it's done, it's done. People aren't changing back in a hurry.
True.
Because they, even if you're doing that with a butt pad, I hate that term, by the way.
It sounds like a cushion, doesn't it?
Yeah, I want to laugh like a child.
It sounds worse than that. I don't know what it sounds like. you're still shaving the end off the stock to make it dead flat to put that thing on. So
no,
you
I mean
lose
one
the
of
little bit of.
I mean one of those
Oh, you
leather
mean
jobbies.
You can't spend all this money and stick a leather jobby on the end of your gun.
We don't know how much money it is. I mean, it might be a really cheap pair of
True.
guns.
Yeah.
A stunning pair of Armstrong and Co. guns. I don't really know Armstrong and Co. But
I don't. But, well, they could be stunning and not very much money.
yeah, this is true.
Yeah, I mean, well, old side-by-sides are not worth an awful lot, are they?
No.
But the fact he's suggesting breaking them up seems like they're just going to start altering them. So maybe that changes things.
Well, we don't know the specifics, so I don't think we can opine on it, but don't start hacking bits off the end if you're going to do this. Let's assume that they've gone ahead with it then, and they decide who's going to have number 1 and number 2. I think we can have some fun here.
That's got to be done in the old student drinking competition, hasn't it? Sort of last man standing gets to choose.
That combined with a round of clays, combined with some sort of driving challenge, combined
Probably
with
drinking competition combined with clay. You
no,
may
I didn't mean it
them at different times.
I meant like a sort of like a whatever we're calling this, like a Cirencester pentathlon of manliness to decide who.
I think whoever's got the best mullet should get number 1.
Well, but by the end of March,
If they're RAU, they've already got a mullet.
They will.
Just and a good old fashioned arm wrestle to chuck in.
Yeah, you got to have an arm wrestle. That's really important. And I think the loser gets the double gun case to remind them of the stupidity of breaking up the pair of guns where they're going to open it every time and
to
one
make them
section.
Yeah, actually, having the double gun case, he's put as a positive. It's a negative.
It's a negative.
Yeah,
because everyone's going to look at you and go, "Where's the other?" And then you've got to answer with this. Unless you get to borrow the other gun.
If you turned up on quite a smart day and you couldn't borrow the other gun, and you turned up with one gun, and everyone looks at you, would you just turn around to your host and say, "Sorry, I thought it was just going to be a bit shit today"? So how do you do that?
Or every time put on the shock face of, "Oh shit, where's it gone?"
Yeah.
And then
you'd have to. Only works once though, Chris. You couldn't keep going back every year to the same place.
Or when you don't realise that someone's seen you do that before and then you do it.
It's like pretending to be on the phone and it rings, isn't it? It's...
I'm not sure we've offered any advice, have we?
I think, but my view is they should go ahead and do it because they're not, it's a real opportunity for both of them to have a really nice gun. Build in the prenup, and the caveat being if either of you has to do anything wildly drastic to the woodwork, do something else. And mud wrestling for the rights to own number 1.
Yeah, I mean, ending up with the double gun case and just number 2 is really, it's not worth entering into this, is it?
Just as a side note, I really like the idea of the RAU pentathlon. I would like suggestions on a postcard for the correct events to be undertaken in the RAU pentathlon, please.
There probably already is a student union one. They'll just send you the rules.
It's been in operation for years.
But I agree. I agree, actually, Jordan. If you've got the opportunity to own something nice that you desire and you can afford it, why not? It's as simple as that.
You only live once.
Good. Right, Chris, what's next?
So this episode's unpopular opinion comes from someone that we shall call Livesey, who writes, "I'm fully aware that the tradition of enjoying a drink or two is well ingrained in the shooting community, but I'd like to offer an unpopular opinion. It's possible to have a brilliant shoot day without touching a drop of alcohol. While I understand the camaraderie of popping a cork on the sloe gin after the day's last bird, there's a lot to be said for staying sharp and fully present throughout the day. While opting for an alcohol-free shoot day means sacrificing enjoyment or spirit, it can mean enjoying the company of friends and the sport itself to the fullest, without the fog of a hangover or the need for recovery the next morning. Look forward to hearing your thoughts."
That's depressing, isn't it? No,
Like,
Actually,
so we're
26
26 minutes into this podcast. Like if you're really anti-shooting, I don't think many people have got this far into the podcast. So I feel like we're sort of okay to
We're in a
talk a
safe
little bit
space,
more.
you're saying?
Is yeah, 27 minutes in is fairly safe, but you never know. Someone might segment it out and spread it all over social media. But go on, Tim. What's your thoughts?
I've actually, in more recent times, I've shot on more and more and more shoots that are dry during the day. Has it made it any less enjoyable? No. Have I noticed? Probably not.
Can we define dry? Because
So
I understand you mean absolutely none by your term
absolutely
dry.
no
there.
alcohol at all. So I've shot on quite a few shoots. There's absolutely no alcohol at all until after the last drive.
The Americans would think we're nuts for drinking and shooting.
But nobody gets it. It sounds like we drink a lot. It's a half. Even if you pour a glass of prosecco, it's not a glass. It's never. It's always a. It's a
Snifter.
taste, isn't it? It's a snifter.
So I'm nearly always driving home from shoots because of the way that they fall, and the fact I live in Kent. You have to leave the night before for most places, and so I can't do 2 nights away. It's just too much. So by default, I end up driving after the shoot. So I'm not someone who's going to say, "Oh, I love getting leathered on a shoot day." That just simply really actually never happens. I definitely drink too much the night before. That's just a go-to thing. But what I'm saying here is about the reason I was asking the question about dry is I love to have like a tiny snifter of red wine to go with the meal at lunch or whatever it is. Or, like a tiny taster of sloe gin in the morning, because it's about the sort of place and the occasion and the act of doing it as much as anything. And that's below the drink drive limit. And therefore, as far as I'm concerned, it kind of isn't drinking. Is that fair?
Yeah. No, I think gone are the days where you'd write to your friends and say, "Would you like to come for an armed drinks party?" I don't think that sort of happens anymore. But so I'm the same as you. I quite like the choosing a gun peg with a small sloe gin or whatever it is the host happened to have found in the cupboard that they made 12 years ago, or and I quite like 11s with something to drink just to take the edge off the cold or heat as it is in September, whatever it is. That's great, but it's in moderation. So, but where I haven't had it and where there hasn't been any drinks tends to be the days that I've got a 13-year-old who's a avid game shot. He's mental on it literally. So he tends to get the invites I used to get now. Which is bloody annoying. but so those days, because it tends to be 13, 15, 16-year-old shooting, tend to be dry. The adults don't have a drink because you're standing with a 12, 13-year-old. But I know that's probably why you don't lose anything, because you're really enjoying watching the next generation coming on and learning all about it. But when we have our days at home, we stop for a drink at 11s. But I don't think it detracts or... It doesn't detract from it.
It's so funny when you try and work out what it is that makes a shoot day great. We always say, well, it's not the pulling the trigger, it's the social, it's all the rest of it. And then you go, but the social, okay, does that mean the chat at 11s and the passing around a hip flask and the gun bus, and that what we mean? And you go, well, no, if you took the drink away, it wouldn't mean that so much. It's the combination, it's the sum of its parts, right?
So you're absolutely right here, because if we all rocked up to 11s and there was absolutely nothing, that 11s is not going to last very long. It just isn't. People just sort of get jittery and they're like, should we go and shoot something? That's kind of like that's what happens. If you even if it's a small drink, if you stick a drink in someone's hand, there is a social thing that occurs where everyone relaxes and everyone just starts really enjoying each other's company and has lots of conversation. And that's what makes part of the shoot day. So the answer to this is do whatever you need to do to make sure that happens. Now, if that's awesome bullshot or consomme or whatever it might be, and you've got that coming out your ears with all the sausage rolls, then you might be able to get away with the fact that no one really notices. But if you can't do that properly with a bit of meaning and it's just like tinned Heinz soup, then people are going to want to drink.
Having something to do with your hands whilst you're standing around chatting is mainly a cup of tea would fulfill the same function.
That's the ingrained social thing, isn't it? That act of standing there with something in your hands gets people talking.
Yeah.
It does, and especially, I think you've got very different things if you've got a team of guns that don't know each other very well, or a team of guns that are busy mates for 30 years.
Yeah.
It will be a different makeup. So it's a really good point whether you, as to the shoot needs to cater for everybody. Doesn't mean they don't need to, but they cater for everybody.
Mm.
And a shoot that does it well, you don't notice necessarily what it is, because you're having a great time, you've got something in your hand, you're having a little bite to eat, and you're not being rushed on to the next thing, or you're not rushing them on to the next thing,
and
because you're enjoying it.
And actually, the more I think about this, the ones where I've not thought about drink at all, or very little, has been the ones where they make a massive effort on the food. Someone pops out the barbecue on the side of the gun bus type thing and goes, "We've got some partridge breast and whatever, and we've done it like this." And those ones you barely have time to have a drink because you're like, "Oh, I've got this exciting thing you've got coming up."
I mean, the other thing is, I've been on one or two shoots where you stop for a drink and a something after every drive, and I think that's too much. I understand that they're moving beaters around and blanking bits of ground in, all this, so they're just trying to find a way of keeping you entertained. But I don't want a glass of champagne every 45 minutes on a shoot day.
I know what you mean. I just want to point out that you have done that once, and
oh yeah,
it worked.
I'm perfectly. I just think it's one to. I think you could dial that back.
No, you've done it once, and I've seen you enjoy it.
Oh, I'm not saying I don't enjoy it. I'll drink it.
You've done it once. I've seen you enjoy it, and you definitely want to go back.
But I was also thinking, like, have I ever had a dry shoot day? And I think probably the last time was probably when I was about 16. So what's it like shooting, alcohol free? I don't know, is the short answer.
Oh, it's much harder.
You feel every miss much more, don't you?
You do.
Yeah, there's a different debate. Hey. My dad's convinced that have a drink and, the wheels fall off his shooting, as it were.
Really?
Yeah, but it's horses for courses, isn't it? Everybody reacts differently. Some people relax. You can see it after 11s. Some of the guns that were awful beforehand. I mean, I do a lot of loading, and sometimes just one little 3 sips is generally what it is, isn't it? It's 3 sips of a drink, and they relax. And it won't be the alcohol, but it'll be the social interaction they've had with the other people to relax them into the situation they're in.
I mean, when we had Ollie on to talk about sort of the psychology of shooting and sports psychology and that sort of thing, so much of it is to do with the social pressure that you're putting on yourself. Oh, they're all watching me. And then you talk to them at 11s and discover that they've all been shooting terribly or think they have. Yeah. Then you start to think, well, it doesn't matter. If they're having a nice time and I'm having a nice time, it's all good, isn't it? But I also I think, you go abroad and alcohol plays a particularly strong part in nearly all social interactions that we have as Brits compared to other cultures, that it just sort of becomes a default, doesn't it?
Yeah. I shot in Denmark a few years ago, and 11s was hot chocolate.
With or without aquavit?
Well, it was without aquavit. That was the really weird thing. But so 11s was hot chocolate. It was hot dogs and hot chocolate.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you dip the hot dog in the hot chocolate?
I didn't quite know what to do with a hot dog. I was watching everybody else. They just loaded it with sauerkraut and mustard, and it was actually quite good.
That sounds good.
But, hot dogs are Danish. But you're right, the cultures have got it very different. But if you look at some of the French duck shooting and pigeon shooting, I mean, they'll actually take a chef to those pigeon towers with them, won't they? And have someone cooking.
That's living.
Yeah, that's
epic. Yeah, I mean, pigeon towers have always been sort of high up my list of just things that need to exist more in this life. Taking a chef to one is something else. I mean, you don't want like clouds of smoke coming off your barbecue in your pigeon tower, do you? Surely would it make a difference? Yeah, it must do.
Well, I don't know, but I don't think they're overly worried about that. With if you've taken a chef, the shooting is probably a secondary. It's probably a secondary.
But there's a difference between just taking a chef to go and have a have a barbecue at the top of a canopy of a wood versus like actually going shooting.
You imagine Jeff Garrett, who does a lot of pigeon shooting on YouTube. Hang on a minute. So, garçon back here's just made me burger or whatever it is. we just wouldn't do it, would we, in our pigeon hide?
So unpopular opinion or not, it's possible to have a brilliant shoot day without touching a drop of alcohol. I mean, my opinion, of course it's possible. It's not an unpopular opinion at all. It can't be, surely.
I agree. Yeah. No, it must be.
I think he's phrased it wrong. It's possible to have, or
yeah. Well, I think it's possible, but it's probably still unpopular.
Yeah,
possible
his
but
opinion,
not desirable.
Yeah.
His opinion is popular. The outcome of it is unpopular.
Yes, like Sunday lunch without red wine.
Yeah. Why bother?
Yes.
Just even if it's a small glass. And my point is, even if you're driving home, just have a super tiny glass because it goes really, really nicely and it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they haven't yet banned like zero, made it zero tolerance.
No.
Or have they? Shit, have I said something wrong? It's not. There's no.
There's no law about being mildly inebriated in the presence of a shotgun.
Thank God for that. Just double checking. I had an
You
absolute panic attack.
You work on the drink. You work on the drink driving rules generally, don't you? If you one glass or half a glass is fine.
How many units in your Corona can you drive after one of them? It's basically water.
Anything I'm driving after this is some emails from my laptop. I've got no idea.
Well, it's reduced alcohol because that one hasn't got the lime in the top.
What?
You're supposed to put lime in the top of the
I know, I couldn't find one.
That's to keep the flies out, though.
Yeah, but what did you mean about reduced alcohol?
Well, if you don't have the lime, it can't be the real thing. So
I see what you mean.
You've got to look at any reason to be able to drink
1.5 units. What's that in English?
I don't even know what the drink drive limit is.
It's not very good for our debating the unpopular opinion when we don't even know what the limit is.
I think maybe it gives probably the clearest possible decision as to whether it's an unpopular opinion, though.
Yeah,
but also, the limit's got nothing to do with units. It's about how you react to them, surely, because it's about in your blood.
Yeah.
Okay, right. We're digging ourselves into a right hole here.
Well, we'll call it a popular opinion because we agree with him.
So. Yeah.
Done. Right, moving on.
Good. Right, so Lancelot and Livesey and now you, Tim, are the newest members of the Most Noble Order of the Garters and will soon be in receipt of a set of the much-coveted Guns on Pegs podcast shooting sock garters. If you too have a shooting confession, quandary, or a query that you'd like us and our guests to help you with, or if you've got an unpopular opinion, or a forgotten drive, or a Mook podcast selection to share, and you'd like a set of garters, drop us an email to pod@gunsonpegs.com.
So the Department of Transport recommends no more than 2 to 3 units of alcohol if you're a man and no more than 1 to 2 units if you're a woman. So you can have 2 of these Coronas, according to the Department of Transport. That's enough for me on a shoot day. Popular. Thank you.
Brilliant. There we go.
Right, Tim. I'm going to start you off with a tricky one. Director of Environment Policy and Politics. I've got the silliest job title in field sports, but what does yours mean?
Massive business cards. Just to fit that title on it. And that's what it is. That's basically what it means. Yeah, they unfold. It's like a takeaway menu. So basically, the NGO is a really small organisation in terms of staff. So we've got 4 full-time staff. That's it.
Really?
In the whole thing. Yeah, a lot of people say the same. So we've all got to have about 400 job titles, so we can cover everything.
I like that. That's clever. That's like sort of taking the call. And let me hand you over to my European desk. Hello, how are you?
Yeah, this is Jose. He once went to Spain. So we're not quite like 40 Towers, but we are. So basically, the two directors, myself and John Clark, who I think you probably both know, you probably certainly do, Chris. And our roles are split across different work areas. So I do a lot more with politics than John, and The policy part, again, because I write most of our consultations, government consultations, and forming policy going forward. So looking not just 5 years, but 10 years down the line, what might happen. And then working with the other shooting organisations to plan defences or attacks for what we suspect might happen. And it is quite strategic. And genuinely, when you hear the Judicial People's Front saying, what have the shooting organisers ever done for us? Why don't you all talk to each other? I'm always astounded that they don't think we do, because that would just be stupid,
Yeah.
So literally daily, we're talking to people from the Countryside Alliance, BASC, GWCT a lot.
It's such a social media type comment to say that, isn't it? Like,
I
just a
love it,
complete,
yeah.
like, my ignorance tells me I'm going to say the most cutting thing possible to suggest like they're inept, and it's like, oh, just think about it before you speak, will you?
Yeah, so we talk. We might have different views, and that's why I quite like the idea with anything. I quite like the idea of having lots of, or not lots, but several different effective organisations. And I'm big into angling, big fisherman, and we used to have that, and it became the Angling Trust, and there's now only one voice, which has lots and lots of positives. The Angling Trust do some really good work, but there's no check or measure. Right, so there's not a smaller organisation saying, "Hang on, that policy might affect this really obscure part of something down here, right in the right bottom corner of our
Well, and
world."
do you know, I was talking to somebody else on this fishing, and particularly on water quality. Somebody was, I think it was Guy Adams, wrote a piece on Scribehound about how when there is a water quality summit and they get all the relevant organizations together, you have one fishing voice there in the form of the Angling Trust, and then you've got 15 different wildlife trusts, and so there's so many different, so they have just more bodies in the room at these events rather than
Which it turns out is how these guys react to influence, because anything in Wales goes, well, we had 5,000 signatures, it must be important, so we'll ban it. And it's like,
Yeah.
you realise 5,000 is not very many people. That could be
Yeah.
the employees of all the organisations.
but actually, Chris, that's quite interesting, because when they had 88,000 people saying we don't think you should ban the release of game birds, they said we don't believe that 72,000 of you understood the question, so we're going to discount you. Right. So we're only going to take the 2,500 or whatever it was that said they agree with the government.
talk about moving the goalposts.
So when
how many people did they? They banned the greyhound thing. How many people filled that one out?
I honestly don't know off the top of my head. I could look it up.
I think it was 15,000.
Yeah, which would have been quite a big one for Wales.
But it's ridiculous.
Well, I'm going to say we're not going to pontificate on that, because Guy Adams has done a piece on it, and it's coming out this week on Scribehound on how that greyhound ban came to be, and it's a very interesting story.
You were the person that told me the little tidbit, and it's absolute. I mean, it's enough to make a blood boil, but it needs reading.
It's fascinating. I'm not going to say any more because it is really interesting. But yeah, a remarkable insight into how deals get done. Yeah. So what are the big sort of challenges and campaigns that you guys are working on at the minute then, Tim?
So some of the big ones at the minute are going to be general license on special protected areas and SPAs and SPCs, which saw 2 years ago the individual licenses being released for shoots to release game birds on certain European protected sites, and then with lots of lobbying and working with DEFRA, a general license was issued which met some criteria that shoots could actually operate, because some of the individual licenses were absolutely bonkers. There's a really small walk one, stand one shoot on Salisbury Plain, and they released a few birds, and I mean it is a handful of pheasants. It's in the hundreds of pheasants for them to shoot 3 Saturdays, right? And their license came through from Natural England, and they weren't allowed to release game until after the 1st of November. So we've got, so with that lobbying, we then went back to the minister and said, look, this is completely impractical, totally stupid, blah, blah, blah. And then they issued a general license. Now, DEFRA have controlled that license, and DEFRA seem to be quite a relatively efficient government body for doing these things. Whenever we've had dealings with Natural England, it's been much less efficient and much less sympathetic, let's say, as well, to how farmers want to operate, shoots want to operate, etc. So I think at the minute it looks like the government have changed, and they're going to move this particular licensing back to Natural England from DEFRA.
Right.
And they were supposed to let everybody know by the 28th of February what was going to happen, and we're now into the March, and there still hasn't been an announcement. So shoots that are involved in these areas can't plan yet for next year. So that it sounds quite minor because it's not a massive number of shoots, but in terms of man hours, it's huge.
And it's also principle. The fact that they can get away with being so blasé about their impact is the bit that I think needs focusing on.
Absolutely.
They just don't care, really, do they?
Well, do you know what though? I was for an article. I was looking into some of the budgets for some significant organisations that have a voice in the way the countryside is run. Natural England's budget is absolutely tiny. It's like 300 million or something like that. It's when you think it's a major arm of government, it's got hardly any cash. So I think a lot of people say, the people we work with on the ground at Natural England are generally pretty helpful and great. Yeah. This is often what you hear about a lot of these places. But then once it gets into the sort of bureaucracy side of it, it starts to get a bit more difficult. And they just haven't got the money that they need to do any of the things that they need to do.
No, they don't. And we also look at our own little world. So we're interested in general licensing and things like that. But they're also doing night shooting, badgers, TB in cattle, sphagnum moth. Their remit is massive. So, and their staff is really small comparatively. So that's one of the reasons they struggle. Where DEFRA's got a much bigger budget, much bigger staff, and it just sort of makes sense to me. But you wouldn't be in government if you did things that were sensible and logical, would you? You'd be like earning loads of money in the city. so
that's a pretty damning verdict on the situation.
Well, hopefully none of them listen to the podcast. So when I'm next up in Whitehall, I listen to what.
How much time do you spend in Whitehall?
Not very much. Only when I have meetings. So again, we can't spend a lot of time wandering around the corridors trying to bump into people because there's loads of other stuff that needs doing.
Yeah.
So we concentrate on getting the meeting, and what we're currently doing. So what we tend to do is, I said we co-op work. Countryside Alliance are really good at being in Whitehall, right? Countryside Alliance are brilliant at that. They brief us on what's going on, who we need to speak to, and then we can use the in that actually we're the people with dirty fingernails. Our members are the ones that actually physically do these jobs. So you need to talk to us. And then we try and get these politicians out to the countryside. And then one of the tactics we do is we're just organising one in Yorkshire. If we can get the MP to the estate, it's not just a gamekeeper he meets. We try and get the estate director or factor, the guy who owns the local garage, who repairs the vehicles on the game shoot, the guy who owns the corner shop.
That's powerful. It's a nice blend to do it with a two-pronged attack in the use of the CA that you're talking about there. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
And then you do quite a lot of sort of outreachy type stuff as well, don't you? Because I think when there was that shooting feature on Countryfile, what was it, 2 years ago now? That was sort of your doing, wasn't it? The NGO, or you connected them with the shoot.
Was that the only positive Countryfile piece I think I can remember? Is that fair?
Probably.
I think that one went pretty well, if it's the one I remember.
It was very good. Yes, it was very good. They actually showed a pheasant being shot.
Did they? Goodness.
Yes, they interviewed our chairman. They showed dog trainers. So it was really positive. Those things are quite hard to. I think that was about 5.5 months to get that first contact through.
Oh my goodness.
That was quite a long one. So that was done with our PR team and Camilla, who writes for Scribehound. Go and read her articles; they're brilliant. So Camilla does a lot of that, and Camilla's really good on the political front as well. So but these things are really hard.
It's well, do you know what's so mad about that? Just because this is exactly the sort of thing that comes up. You said at the start you've got 4 full-time people, and it takes 5.5 months to get your little segment on Countryfile, which is one of 4, 5, 6 segments on Countryfile, which is watched by how many people? Like, yeah, a few, but not that many in the grand scheme of things, right? And it takes that long for you to make that happen. And if you hadn't have done it, the shooting community would have been up in arms
Yeah,
as like,
absolutely.
oh my God, where were you being represented on this? Yeah, you have to bust a gut with 4 people to then not take up all these other things just to get your little segment, and then to get shot down going, it wasn't good enough anyway. You just think you can't win.
Well, there's a bit of that, but if I got up in the morning with that attitude, we would get nowhere. So,
Oh, sorry.
but
I mean,
you
I'm just
no,
saying
I know,
that's
I
what
know.
that's why it's great that you do
Yeah.
it and don't.
Yeah, no, I know. But you'll feel the same frustration as I feel most of my working day. But the other interesting thing is we collectively as a shooting society are fixated on the BBC.
Yeah,
Absolutely fixated on the BBC.
so true.
Right, absolutely plummeting viewing figures. Right, I know watches Countryfile. It's very urban, etc., etc. We've got all these complaints. I think going forward, and this is something we need to be looking at collectively as a sector, Amazon Prime, Netflix, Paramount Plus, that's where we need to get programs. These things have got millions and millions and millions of subscribers, and it's got to be the future. Yeah, there's something that popped up on the internet the other day called YouTube. Right, so
I don't know if you've heard of
it. Yeah, don't know if you come across it. Right, now anyone in the world can access YouTube, and all we get quite often from shooters is you've got to get something on the 6 o'clock news on BBC that no one watches, whereas YouTube has got access to 200 billion people. It's about how we market ourselves and help ourselves. And one of the other key things I've been doing at the minute is we've been setting up these local lobby groups. So we've got one running in South Wales, one running East Anglia. There's one in Shropshire. I'm going to be setting one up in Cambridgeshire and Essex soon. What they are, you don't have to be an NGO member. Anyone can join them. They're run
Are these
through
shoot groups?
They're similar, but these are lobby groups. So it's the same as a shoot group, Chris, but it's open to beaters, wildfowlers, fishermen, anyone.
Nice.
You don't have to be a member. So literally the whole thing's on WhatsApp. You don't actually physically meet. But literally what we do is say, right, in South Wales, they've said they're going to, I don't know, whatever, just off the top of my head, ban coracle fishing. They haven't said they're going to do that, but let's just say they did. So we would put a thing on the WhatsApp group saying, right, guys, these 4 AMs are in your area. We need you to write to them personally, not a round robin, sign this letter. Contact us. We will write the letter for you. So they literally send us a WhatsApp, say, yeah, I'd like to. We go back to them. Do you speak Welsh? Are you a farmer? Do you do this? Yeah. And we write a bespoke letter for their AM. So everyone gets a bespoke letter. And we've done the same in East Anglia with snare band, with these general licenses. So we've had people, so it's generally it's actually the constituents' views, but it's enabling them to help themselves. It's giving them the tools to do it. And going forward, collectively, I would love to see all shooters get involved with this, because the voice we've got is really powerful, especially to a new government who are a bit wobbly. So if an MP gets 12 letters on the same subject, that's a lot.
Interesting.
Right. So we need to, so it's something we're facilitating. We're trying to do more of, but it's resources. But there's nothing to stop, Guns on Pegs listeners contacting the NGO saying, look, I've got this issue, as long as it's not certain issues that as long as it's not my bins aren't being collected. Frankly, I don't care. But I don't think my rural police force is doing a job. Right. Let's help you write to the PCC.
Well, I mean, rural policing is it's not a terribly sexy thing, is it? But it is a thing that I imagine that you at the NGO have to think about a lot more because, well, for example, there was that horrible story sort of shortly before Christmas, I think it was, about the hare courses, not far from where I am, actually, here in Hampshire,
Oh god, that was horrible.
Really being pretty unpleasant. And I think there was a guy who was rammed with a car and that sort of thing. So you must have to deal a lot with that kind of thing, right?
Yeah. So we do all the time. There were two really bad instances before Christmas. One was in Wiltshire by Stonehenge, actually on a farm I used to work on as a student called Springbottom
Really?
Farm. There were 15 vehicles chasing hares at night, filming it on the dark web, casting it. The farmer went, obviously, phoned the police. He was actually guiding the police in. They saw his vehicle. They surrounded him, started ramming him, firing steel ball bearings through the. They actually went through the metalwork of the vehicle and wrote a 2-year-old Toyota Hilux off.
God.
Pretty scary for everyone concerned. Prior to that, a gamekeeper in Hampshire was run over by poachers and was in a coma for 3 days.
Oh my god!
Broke his hip, broke his legs, punctured his lungs, broke his collarbone. But these aren't isolated instances. You saw Hertfordshire was on the news in the new year, wasn't it? Where the gypsies literally covered the whole of the county with cars chasing hares.
Oh, wasn't that up in the Fens?
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
I saw Robert Sears, the guy who used to run the Game Fair many years ago. I saw him being quoted in one of the papers. I realised where it was. I mean, around him, it sounded absolutely awful. They basically decided they were just going to terrorise the county, didn't they?
Yeah. I mean, they filled their cars up in the petrol stations, drove off. They damaged a fire engine on exercise. It was horrific. It was absolutely horrific. So where you are, Chris, down in Kent, there's big problems. It's across the south of England, basically. You've got these huge problems.
Yeah, I think barely a week goes by without seeing some hare coursing story or another.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned to you guys briefly at the start. This guy I met on Saturday, he's a keeper on a wild bird shoot in Kent, and they've got 100 greys, so 50 pairs, which they've been nurturing for a long time. And he's super proud. He's proper keeper. He talked to him about the passion that's got him to that point. And they lost 18 the other night to a single vehicle, hare coursing.
Yeah.
So 18% of their total number of greys just to one vehicle running over. And I know this isn't someone being injured, like that awful story and so on, but the point is just like, how ridiculous is this?
It is. So some of the frustrations from our point of view is the NGO have been saying for about 14 years that someone's going to get hurt. We've been in high level ministry meetings saying that somebody's going to get hurt, and now they have. Lots of people have got hurt. Some police forces take it seriously. There's not a coordinated approach. Some don't. The sentencing is pitiful, absolutely pitiful for hare coursing. So there's no disincentive to do it. The risk versus reward is. There's a WhatsApp that went round the other day with some guys auctioning a lurcher type dog on the table of a pub in the Fens, and it went for £50,000. They were paid cash.
Jeepers!
So the risk versus reward is it's incredible. So the NGO we've made contact with the policing minister, and we're calling for a national task force, so a national intelligence body that can put these things together and work out who these people are and then go and arrest them. And there's also a sentencing consultation that's live to the 25th of April on the Sentencing Council's website that asks people's opinion of what they think the maximum sentence for hare coursing should be. And they're splitting it into various things. So interesting, I was talking to a PCC the other day. He said hare coursing in the way it's going on now, this is a really deep topic for a sort of light-hearted podcast, but if you were to drill down into every element of hare coursing, other than one, which is they want no political outcome from it, it would be classed as domestic terrorism.
Wow.
So
really?
So under the 2000 Anti-Terrorism Act, there's a criteria that spells out if it's terrorism. So it's willful lawlessness, intimidation, the use of violence, the damage of property, and the attacking of people for a political intent. So all the other five, so that's the difference. So all the other five would meet the criteria, apart from there's no political intent. It's a monetary gain.
Why is the political intent bit in there? Surely,
well, that's what makes it terrorism rather than just being a dickhead.
Organised crime. Yeah.
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 Wow. So, talking of political intent, I was listening to your podcast the other day, an episode from before Christmas, I think, where you and Johnny were talking about reintroductions, and obviously you mentioned earlier on that you were at this translocation. Is that the word?
Yeah, you got to call them
Translocation.
translocations now. It's not it's translocations now.
It's obviously been in the news a lot in the last month or so. We've had lynx in Scotland. We've had wild boar in Scotland. There was a story about a raccoon dog in Wales that was
Correct.
kicking
That's
about.
still on the loose.
Still on the loose. Beavers are now going to be allowed to be released into the wild rather than into enclosures.
Hooray.
You are director of environment. What's the? I know that you've got views.
I've got very strong views. So let's before we go on to my personal Tim Weston views, the NGO's view on translocation is it's fine as long as it's the right species in the right place for the right reason at the right time. Okay.
Yeah.
So no issue. So if you said to me, I've got a really good translocation project, I would love to get blackgrass into the New Forest. I don't think anyone could argue with that. We'd love to translocate lapwings back to the fens or whatever. Great. So the issue comes more often than not is it's really complex. So you got a thing called the IUCN guidelines, right? Which are the international guidelines that you sign up to do a translocation of anything. And then you've got Natural England guidelines, and Nature Scott guidelines, Natural Resources Wales guidelines, etc., etc. So what a conservation body does is they say, well, we quite like that bit in the IUCN guidelines because we can meet that bit. And we quite like that bit in the Natural England bit because we can do that. Don't like that bit, so we'll forget that's written down because we probably can't meet that bit. And the key they generally can't meet is one of the key principles of translocations is do no harm. Right?
Sorry, yeah.
So if you're going to release...
You're getting ready to boil my blood.
So if you're going to release a pine marten, for instance, and they're trying to do it on the Kent Weald at the minute, it's one of the projects that's going on.
Yeah,
pine martens back into the High Weald. So the governing principle should be.
We already lost 8 chickens the other day. We don't need these as well, you know.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. So will it do harm, Chris? If they release pine martens, will it do harm? Probably to something, right?
Yeah,
probably. So therefore, the project probably couldn't happen. So they say, well, we're not going to use that part of the IUCN guidelines. We're going to use the Natural England guidelines, which doesn't have a do no harm part.
Right.
Now, the licensing actually for pine martens is really difficult, and it was for beavers, and it certainly will be for lynx and wolves. And one of the interesting things, which was Chatham House rules, so I'm probably not allowed to say, but I'm going to.
No names, no pack drill.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the comments at this translocation meeting was from one of the conservation bodies. Well, licensing is really difficult to get, which is why there's lots of illegal releases going on.
Oh my God.
What's fascinating about that is if it was a shooting organization saying that, people would lose their mind.
Yes, and interestingly, one of the employees from a government sector organisation just said, wow. So we've got gamekeepers in the room. If that individual there had said the same thing, it's really hard to work with buzzards, so we're just going to break the law. Collectively, the 70 of you would have lynched him.
Yeah.
Sorry, did someone say that?
Yes, an employee, a government agency employee said that. And she said, look, I cannot differentiate between one illegal act over another.
Absolutely.
And just because licensing is hard doesn't mean you shouldn't go through the process.
Yeah.
But it's quite extraordinary.
And so they're clear. And this is obviously about cats and what was the bloody thing up in Scotland the other day?
Well, the lynx, wild boar.
Lynx and wild boar.
It was cats, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Lynx and wild boar.
I mean, it had all the hallmarks of an illegal release.
Yeah, but it was a legal release. You know, they're out there. You can't release them. There's the
but as in like it wasn't an accident or whatever someone tries to blame it on. Everyone knows this, and this is the thing. It's just becoming so like blasé that it's almost to the point where when they don't find a culprit of one of these, at what point does it become the norm that people just give it a go?
Well, so we're getting there, Chris. That's the problem. And now part of the problem is even with a legal release, they don't build a mitigating factor into the license. So let's say we do release lions and tigers and bears, oh my, they will still be protected, and there will be no license mechanism available to remove that species.
Yes. That's the thing, isn't it?
Release beavers on the river test.
But
right,
let me
where I
make
used to
hats
work.
out of them.
We
I'll
won't
have
be
as
allowed
many
to.
beavers
So
as you like if I can have beaver skin hat.
it'll be amazing. So I tell you what, beaver skin gun slip would be really useful,
Ooh,
because it would keep
yeah.
your gun really dry, wouldn't it?
It would. But you know, I find myself sometimes a bit torn about this sort of thing, because would it be cool to have lynx in the UK? Yeah, it would
Yes.
be really cool. I would
Yeah.
I would be one of the first people signing up to go and see if I can see a lynx.
Yeah.
But you have to build in the contingencies, right? If you lose a sheep, we're going to pay you. If it eats your dog, we're going to pay you. You know, all this sort of stuff
Well,
needs
yeah,
to be
see,
built into it, and you have to be able to control them if they're a problem. And
yeah, well, I think that's the key. So I've just got back from Sweden, and the Swedish method. I was actually skiing, and I met these Swedish hunters, because it's so cold when you're skiing there. The best jacket is one of those Dayglow deer hunter ones you wear. So I ski in an orange deer hunter jacket. And so you're in the ski lift in Sweden, because everyone hunts. Are you a hunter in England? So you start a conversation. It's really quite a nice dialogue, actually. And I was chatting to some guys from the very far north of Sweden, where they've got a lot of wolves, and these were sheep farmers. And their problem is they used to be able to control the wolves. They can't anymore. So what the Swedish government have done is they do a wolf count, and you get paid for the volume of wolves across the territory, not on how many sheep they kill. Yeah. So they're much more settled with the idea of wolves now, because they could elect a wolf farm, right? So they could elect to encourage wolves and get a higher payment.
I see. I mean, this is sensible thinking. This just doesn't happen over here.
I know, it never would either. And if they do become a problem, and you can prove that it's going to affect your livelihood, you can cull those wolves.
It's like wild boar as well, right? If some wild boar turned up on the farm here in Hampshire, I wouldn't be that disappointed, because I think ragu al cingale is delicious.
Yeah.
But they're not protected anyway, so you can shoot them.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. Yeah, people. This is the idea of stuff not being there, stuff being there that shouldn't be there, and then it being protected for being there, despite it not being allowed to be there. It's just ludicrous. Like, this doesn't make any sense.
And wild boar is a really good example, George, because wild boar are an animal. So when they say we need lynx because they were here 1,100 years ago, we need pine marten because they were here 1,000 years ago, we need beaver because they were here 400 years ago. Well, boar were here throughout the ice ages till relatively recently, about 500 years ago. But the conservationists, in inverted commas, don't want boar because they're destructive. So they're putting a value on one animal over another, and my very cynical brain is because there's currently funding available for beavers and pine martens and some lynx, right?
But as ecosystem engineers, right, wild boar are amazing. I've just read a brilliant book which I recommend. It's called Groundbreakers by Chantal Lyons, and it's just absolutely fascinating on the ecosystem engineering that wild boar do. There's a really strong argument for having them back.
That'd be quite interesting. I'd see that's the sort of thing, and we've got them in the Dean, and they're thriving. I wrote an article years and years ago when they first established, where they said there's absolutely no way of getting rid of them if we wanted to. And I was talking about the will to do it, because we eradicated them with hunting dogs and pointy sticks.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure with thermal imaging equipment and high-powered rifles, if we wanted to, we could. So it was about the will to get rid of them, not about the fact that we didn't get rid of them. And the same with introductions. It's about the will to introduce.
This whole conversation is why I enjoy a lot of what goes on Scribehound Countryside, because it's like the voice of sort of common sense from all these people on the ground that take fine, they might have a view which is maybe pro shooting to start with, but they come at it from a very sensible angle. And a lot of this stuff, people call shooting people extreme in their opinion or whatever, but this sort of stuff you're talking about here, Tim, is just totally, it's on another level of like extremist view versus a lot of what the sort of the field sportsy or the countryside people as we know them isn't in terms of the way they think. You have to hope that essentially common sense will end up prevailing, and people who think rationally and take into account lots of different points of view will their voice will be heard.
Well, they will, and if we were to all lobby individually, your voice would be heard a lot
He's
better.
a pro.
Because you could get back, you could write to your MP in Kent and say, "Look, they're thinking about introducing pine martens. These are the reasons I don't think it's such a great idea."
And do you know what? So, and this happened on Skybound Countryside when people were sort of saying, "Oh, but this is an echo chamber of people with similar thoughts." You're like, no, it couldn't be further from it. We have this gift share thing where we were like, the whole point of this, if you think there's something really important that you want to share outside of this audience here, you can click the gift share button, send it to your MP, send it to your mates, send it to whoever you want to say to, saying this is a fascinating summary of a really, really interesting situation. I think you'd like to read about it. And that's the point. And I can't stand it when people are like, why are you discussing this amongst 3 shooting people on this podcast? It's like, well, of course, we all need to be better informed, and we all need to understand these things so that when it comes up, we know what to do. And
no, well, I agree. But these conversations are really important because people who listen to this are obviously either interested or, well, they're interested from one side or the other. They might be listening from the other side. They might be listening from our side. It doesn't matter. But the conversations are so important to have, so people can understand the view and the topic, and then they can form their own opinion. Now, I'd say 60% of what I say is wrong, but at least people can form that opinion that I'm wrong. And do you know what I mean? That's so important. Debate and conversation is so important. Like, how many times have you a conversation about pheasants? Blueback pheasants are rubbish. They always wander off. Do they? Did you put any down? No, never tried them.
I know we promised we weren't going to talk about lead, but steel cartridges are rubbish. They don't work. Oh, have you tried some? Have you? Oh, no.
No. But I've looked on Facebook.
Yeah.
I heard from the guy who delivers my Chinese that they're no good.
Yeah. The only winner's going to be dentists. That's another one I've heard. But these conversations, and that's why podcasts like this are so important. Scribehound's so important, and just generally anywhere we can get our message out is really important. And equal weight goes to inviting some friends around for a dinner party who aren't involved in it and not being shy about what you're doing. So my wife's a medic, and when we were really young, early 20s, we weren't married, but we were together. We go to dinner party with consultants and doctors and surgeons and things. And I had absolutely no problem with this. What do you do for a living? I'm a gamekeeper. Absolutely no problem with it. And I never have, because you've got a different set of life skills and a different set of experience to open up a dialogue with someone who's probably never heard of it.
I have the same thing with my barber. When I first moved down here and had to change barber, you know that the first question they're going to ask, so what do you do? And I always thought, what am I going to say? Anyway, it turns out he's super keen. He's from Hungary. His family makes venison sausage all the time. I now take him partridge during the season, and
brilliant.
He's a massive ally.
But that's case in point, George. Case in point. Do you know, I got a friend who works in a gun shop who, when he's introduced to people, always says he's an arms dealer. Which I think is quite. I quite like that one.
Antagonist. Well, look, Tim, the way that we finish these pods off, as you well know, is with our Desert Island shooting segment. And the scenario is this, for anyone that hasn't heard it before. The extinction level event asteroid hits tomorrow. Your affairs are in order, loved ones and enemies reconciled, dogs fed, tomatoes watered. Your last day begins how?
Oh, do you know what? I've actually lost sleep over this. This is because I can do what I want, can't I?
Yeah.
So this shoot day is going to be over 2 hemispheres.
Nice,
because that extends the day. So
that's a very good point.
You've effectively got 48 hours, haven't you?
I love this.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're going to start off with a breakfast cooked by my mother.
Right.
Because
at the North Pole, or are you starting at home?
No, we're starting at home. We're starting in Wiltshire, and we're going to shoot a pheasant drive called FM. So it's swear word marvellous is the name of the drive.
Okay, yeah.
It's all right. You can swear on this podcast. It's fine.
Okay. So it was a drive that when I was a keeper we had, and it was called Marvelous, and the owner said we need to rename that to fucking Marvelous. So the drive's called FM because it's sort of radio towers and all that sort of thing. It's a fantastic pheasant drive on a relatively flat bit of land in Wiltshire off a chalk bank, and these things are just unshootable. So it's incredible. And the other really good thing about it is right at the boundary, and they're mainly the neighbours' birds. So that drive always makes me happy.
Ideal keeper's drive, right? That.
Yeah, so that drive
Guns can't hit them, and they're not yours anyway.
And they're flying into the middle of your shoot. So it's just the ideal drive. Right. We're then gonna get in the Guns on Pegs helicopter, and we are going to fly to another friend of mine's little small holding down in Cornwall, where we'll need a bit of time because he's got one of the most amazing snipe bogs ever.
Lovely.
The only issue is the mud is knee deep.
Right.
And Alan, who owns the farm, who I went to college with, is proper Cornish. And whenever you leave the farm, he always looks and goes, "You look a bit thirsty. Let's stop for a rattler." So whenever you do a drive, he instigates that you drive past the pub. So that's definitely one with no drinking.
Yeah, you can have 2 to 3 units, obviously. So
2 to 3 units. So there'll be 4 guns, and Alan will go into the pub and go, "All right, Marge, we'll have 16 pints of rattler." So so we're then going to do a little snipe drive. I'm then going to teleport to Holcombe in the mid 1800s.
Nice.
Time machine usage. We like it.
Yes, I'm going to join one of the royal shoot parties at Holcombe before we go to Sandringham.
Uninvited. That's even cooler.
I'm going to backgun. So I'm gonna backgun on this particular one, and I'm going to stand behind the king, and I'm gonna doff my hat to him at the end and shake his hand with a 20
after you've worked all his eye both times.
Yeah, thank him very much for the kind day, and just leave them wondering who I was.
Very nice.
And then disappear off in your time machine.
Straight back in, yeah.
Yeah, so that's great. Disappear off in the time machine, and then I've never done it, so I'm gonna have a drive at Sandringham, but
on your own.
No. I'm gonna. This one's gonna be with a group of friends, and another group of friends beating. Because this will be back again in the 1800s, same period. Because we know everyone else is at Holcombe.
Well, it's true because the time machine can fit 9 of you, so that's actually works perfectly.
Yeah, it's ideal.
And yeah, as you say, all the king's busy at Holcombe, so
he's at Holcombe, so they're never going to know.
So
they're never going to know we've been poaching Sandringham.
Yeah, I like this.
Should a representative of the NGO be encouraging poaching?
Right. Well, after our chat a second ago, I mean,
yeah, I don't think I'm encouraging it. I'm just committing it. So we've then done our 4 drives in the northern hemisphere. We're gonna stop for a venison Wellington lunch with proper mashed potatoes with equal potato to butter ratio, right? And a little bit of nutmeg, so you got some vegetable. Some really good claret and some peas. So that's going to be the lunch. Okay. So whether there's anyone with me or not, frankly, with that lunch, I don't care. But, there might be some friends. The next drive is going to be over down towards Rotorua in New Zealand because it's now the next day. So we're gonna end up shooting some incredibly tall pheasants in New Zealand. And we're gonna finish the evening off after we've done that one long drive with a cast in Lake Rototiti and try and catch a monster rainbow trout. And then the family are going to sit on the cliff down there on the sea and watch the asteroid hit the world, and everything will end in a happy, warm, fuzzy place.
Marvelous. That's an absolute top draw as island shooting.
I absolutely love that. It's a lot of thought. And the moral of the story is you can't be done for poaching if it's 300 bird day at Sandringham and the King's at Holcombe. Specifically those conditions only.
So it's very specific. It's very specific. But I'm just looking forward to sort of tipping my hat to the King at the end of the drive at Holcombe.
Yeah, I think that's a cracking touch.
going
I
off.
mean, you could run through the cover of the next drive and run away laughing. Just
Well, yeah, you could. I did toy with the idea of shooting on, with the Maharaja when he shot the biggest bag to his own gun, which was whatever it was, 1,000 pheasants, 800 partridge, a pike, and more.
Was that
and a
Duleep
coot.
Singh?
Duleep Singh, yeah.
Yeah.
So I toyed with the idea of joining them, but I thought I'd get bored of all the trigger pulling.
But was that bag on his own? As in, there was no one else shooting.
That was to his. There were others shooting, but that was his
Right.
single gun.
Okay,
Triple gun.
Well, so I was thinking. I think it would be a brave man who backgunned at that time. I'm not
you'd be
sure they
shot.
were the safest of shots.
I thought about that.
I wouldn't want to shoot anywhere near him on that day at all.
Yeah, but the world's going to end, right? So there's
True.
jeopardy.
Yeah.
You got
Get
nothing
shot
to
by
live.
the king. I suppose it's a good way to go.
Yeah,
I don't think it works like that. Where in the I think there's always doubt that the world might not end until it ends. I don't think people go, oh, it's going to end. Just watch me go.
because I was also quite astounded that no one said, "I'll get in your time machine, go back 300 years, and happy days I've got."
Yeah, I always think that, and I think, oh dear, that's maybe a flaw in the system here. But yes, now that you've said that, somebody's going to do that, aren't they?
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
it doesn't work like that. There's still hours that exist in terms of time it takes, but you can use the time machine to go back. But the clock is still ticking. That's the way it works.
Oh, I see.
Wow, that's how I've.
There's a stopwatch in the time
It's
machine.
the elastic nature of time and the yes, fine. It always springs back to the right timeline. Oh gosh, I didn't think we were going into science fiction today. Well, Tim, it's been so much fun and really interesting. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much, guys.
Awesome, Tim. Thank you.
Right, so before we go, all that remains for me to say is there's a final reminder that you can get your hands on a pair of the very exclusive Guns on Pegs podcast shooting stock garters by sending us your dilemmas for us to resolve, or by sharing your unpopular opinions, your forgotten drives, or your podcast suggestions. Just drop us an email to pod@gunsonpegs.com, and if we read it out in the next episode or any future episodes, we will send you some garters. I'll be back in a couple of weeks' time with Jake, Avian, and Sam. Chris will be back in a month or so. But until then, thanks very much for listening, and goodbye.
I'm looking forward to seeing what your team on your pod come up with, George, in regards to the Cirencester pentathlon of manliness.
Oh, it's going to be amazing.